Let me ask you something. When was the last time you walked through a grocery store and wondered where the flour in your bread came from? Or who grew the wheat in your noodles or pasta? Here's the twist. What if I told you that in 2025, much of the world has stopped asking that question about the US? Not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped buying. This isn't some overnight collapse. It's a quiet, relentless shift, farm by farm, port by port, contract by contract. And it's changing the face of global agriculture. Let's talk about how America, once the undisputed wheat powerhouse, has been quietly edged out, and what that could mean next. 1. Philippines, the first major breakup. For years, the Philippines was one of America's best customers, loyal, dependable, importing almost 3 million tons of U.S. wheat annually. Up to 90% of their wheat came from the U.S. That was the past. In 2025, things changed. One Philippine buyer canceled a 12,000-ton contract. Instead, they signed a 110,000-ton deal, but not with America, with Canada and Australia. Why? Officially, price. But behind the scenes? Risk. American wheat started showing up late. Insurance costs rose. One congressional vote could freeze a whole shipment in customs. Even if the wheat was cheaper, it became unpredictable. And so, Philippine shelves stayed full, but not with U.S. flour. Canadian grain stepped in. Quietly. Effectively. Backhand index pointing right analysts say this shift could be the start of a permanent trade reroute across Southeast Asia, where reliability trumps even low prices. 2. France, where bread is sacred. If you know anything about France, you know this. Bread is serious business. Baguettes aren't just food, they're culture. And for decades, France bought premium American wheat for its prized crusts. But in 2025, U.S. wheat imports dropped to a 20-year low. Why? Quality control failures. Higher carbon scores. Certificates missing. Buyers feared delays or rejections over one misstep in U.S. policy. So, France went north to Canada. Canadian exports to the EU surged 40%. Their wheat was clean, precise, tracked by moisture sensors in real time. Shipments hit every metric. Backhand index pointing right, there's a version that says if France doesn't trust U.S. wheat anymore, other EU nations might follow, and America could lose its premium European markets long-term. 3. South Korea, from quality to contamination concerns. In South Korea, U.S. wheat once filled everything: instant noodles, pastries, bread. Until concerns about glyphosate levels hit hard. South Korea's safety threshold tightened to 200 to 400 parts per billion. U.S. wheat exceeded it. Canada? Only 30 to 70. By mid-2025, U.S. market share in South Korea fell from 35% to 17%. Canada soared past 60%. U.S. wheat was labeled risky, literally. Backhand index pointing right. According to food safety experts, this isn't just about Korea. It signals a rising global intolerance for chemical residue. Countries may now build their food safety rules against U.S. products. 4. Mexico, when your friend turns away. Mexico was more than a customer. It was a partner, a neighbor. U.S. wheat once flowed freely across the border, 3 million tons a year. But that flow slowed. By mid-2025, Mexico's imports of U.S. wheat fell 40%. Canadian wheat rose 35%. Argentina joined in. Mexican millers were tired of red tape, last-minute rule changes, delays at the border. A single hiccup in Texas could halt operations in Sonora. Canada, meanwhile, tailored their testing systems to Mexico's needs. Quiet. Predictable. Backhand index pointing right. Experts say losing Mexico is a symbolic blow. If even your closest trade partners turn away, rebuilding trust with distant markets becomes exponentially harder. 5. Italy, pasta's quiet shift north. Italy, home of pasta, proud buyer of U.S. durum wheat, turned to Canada too. By 2025, Canada held 45% of Italy's wheat imports. The U.S.? Just 15%. Italy didn't protest. They didn't complain. They just moved on. Canadian wheat strains were tweaked for elasticity. Deliveries arrived like clockwork. Backhand index pointing right. There's an opinion that Italy's pivot could inspire other traditional buyers to re-examine their supply chains. When heritage food culture shifts suppliers, it's not about cost, it's about trust. 6. Egypt, the giant that left quietly. Egypt is the world's largest wheat importer. American grain used to be in the mix. Not anymore. By 2025, almost all Egypt's wheat came from Russia. The US was too expensive, too inconsistent. Too late. In one move, Egypt rerouted 5 million tons of wheat orders. No press conference. No noise. Just new paperwork. Backhand index pointing right. According to trade economists, this could mark a pivot toward cheaper, less regulated Black Sea exports in major food insecure regions, permanently bypassing the US. 7. Indonesia, Brazil, Germany, Nigeria, one by one. Indonesia chose faster, cheaper Black Sea grain. Their instant noodle boom needed reliability. Brazil, once a net importer, became an exporter, thanks to a 20% boost in domestic wheat yields. They now supply Mexico and parts of Africa. Germany, known for strict regulations, stopped buying U.S. wheat. Paperwork didn't match EU green standards. Canada and domestic wheat filled the gap. Nigeria, a growing flour market, signed 5-year deals with Canadian suppliers. No bids from U.S. firms. Too many delays. Too much risk. Backhand index pointing right. According to agricultural analysts, these market losses reflect a global perception problem. Even when American wheat is great, buyers are no longer confident it'll show up on time. Back home, what it looks like on the ground. And what's happening in America? In Montana, some farmers switched to lentils. In Washington, wheat fields lie fallow. In Texas, co-ops merged. Mills shut down. Inventory climbed by 40% in some regions. Ships set half full in LA. Barges were skipped. Grain rotted. Harvests were burned, not out of anger, but because no one was buying. Backhand index pointing right. There is a version that if this trend continues, the U.S. may permanently lose its wheat export infrastructure. Fewer buyers means fewer processors, rail links, export terminals. That's a feedback loop that's hard to reverse. Trust, the invisible commodity. The consistent theme here? It wasn't just about price or even product quality. It was about trust. Trust that shipments arrive on time. Trust that rules won't change mid-shipment. Trust that contracts will be honored without surprises. And that trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to win back overnight. Backhand index pointing right. According to trade historians, this isn't unprecedented. Empires fall not because of one big mistake, but because of thousands of small, quiet ones. And that's what's happening here, an erosion, not a collapse. So what now? The road ahead. Here's the big question. Can the U.S. reclaim its role in the global grain market?